What is the church trying to accomplish? We're going to talk about that this week. Welcome to the Disciple Standard Podcast. We got a great episode. This question, I think, is so important. So much has been rearranged by COVID. It's the perfect time to step back and just make an evaluation. If you're a part of church life, instead of just going through the motions, what is it we're trying to accomplish? That's the question we're going to tackle today. We also have a great interview with one of my very first disciples, one of my good friends, Aaron Mamuyac. I'm looking forward to it. Let's get started. All right, Jake, for the topic today, I'd like to get into a discussion on this episode. 2 weeks ago, we talked about ministry metrics and measuring what matters. And what I did is I tried to just walk us through what I consider to be the trajectory of all the different types of metrics that churches have thought of and are using to measure effectiveness. So we started off, and I'm not going to take as long as I did last time. You can go back and watch episode 6 if you're interested in this. I encourage you to do that. But we talked about kind of the 1.0 version of church metrics, and it's very simple: butts and saints, dollars and chairs. This is one of the largest things that churches have measured for a long time. And if you want to ask, hey, are we being successful at what we're doing? Churches have measured themselves this way. But we talked about how really we come to realize that's very inadequate. Just because you fill a lot of seats and you have a lot of dollars, that doesn't necessarily mean anything about the ministry of Jesus. So maybe the 2.0 version, which I think might be a little more meaningful and a little better, was to measure how many salvations or baptisms are you celebrating every year? How much participation in your programs do you have? How many volunteers do you have serving? And so the thought is, this might be more meaningful metrics than just the 1.0. Then we moved on to something even more advanced. I talked about this qualitative analysis where churches will actually have their members take surveys, or they'll have community take surveys, and they'll find out things like church satisfaction, or how people report about their spiritual growth, or the breakout of their budget expenditures, or they'll learn about the leadership capability and quality, and even community engagement. You can get this kind of qualitative research. And in fact, there are lots of church consultant groups out there that'll help you measure these things. But then even beyond that, we talked about, and this is maybe newer to our time, the 4.0 metrics for a digital age. So you start measuring things like how many email subscribers do you have? What are your web page stats? Social media likes and follows? How many views are you getting on your videos, on your posts? How about app downloads? You know, churches now have apps, and so how many people are downloading the apps? And we even talked about, which I think is very new, this is the cutting edge. Just in the last year after COVID, people started talking not just about the digital age, but the phygital age, because they realized that the digital and the physical are somehow corresponding with each other. So churches started measuring how many first-time connections have we made as a result of our digital outreach in real life, in the physical realm. How many people are taking a first step, from digital to physical? What's the average duration of online views? Not just how many views do we have, but how much engagement are we really getting as a way of building relationships, and then even engagement with online views, which is a move toward not just, esoteric something digital, but now relationship and interaction with our church or with the people of our church, that kind of thing. But after we got through talking about all of these different metrics and the sophistication of what can be done digitally and now phygitally, I suggested that before all of those, there are other metrics. I call them the 0.0. And we're always talking about upgrading the operating system of the church. But I don't mean like we need to upgrade it to 6.0. I actually am talking about going back to the ancient operating system of the church. And so I suggested the 0.0 version. How many disciples? How many can articulate the gospel? This is a big deal. So Are you having people who have been discipled and truly apprehended and taken in the faith? They're not just taking up a place on a seat somewhere. They've really become disciples of Jesus. How many can articulate the gospel? And you know they can articulate the gospel so that when people ask them about the faith, they're ready to give an answer. How many disciple makers do you have? How many people in your church, not only you'd say they're qualified, but they're actively engaged in doing it? They have relationships that say, I'm intentionally making disciples of these 3 people or this person. How many people in your church are active disciple makers? How many people are multipliers, which means that they've discipled someone who's discipling someone, or the chain could be larger. You're discipling someone who's discipled someone who's discipled someone. If you've done that, you've become a multiplier. And then how many have created a network of 10 people? So this one person has a network and there are 10 people, or 30 people. This one person now has a network of 30 people that they're responsible for because it all started with them, or 60 or 100. And I just suggested that these are things that are measurable. We have a system. If you don't have a way of measuring these things, we have a system to help people measure. We're encouraging people to get plugged into what we're doing. We'd love to help you. And so, if this struck you, or if you have any questions or thoughts, contact us, get in touch with us, just comment on, whether it's YouTube or Facebook or wherever you're seeing this, we will get in touch with you because we'd love to help. But, okay, that's as far as we got. I don't know, Jake, did you have any further thoughts? Because I think this was an important episode, actually. What were your thoughts as you've looked back on all this?
Yeah, looking back, well, I know we talked a lot about like the butts in the seats and stuff. And I see that, I think, and even you from the stage on a Sunday morning, because I'm in the sound booth a lot, where I see everyone. Then even after we talked about it too, I started paying attention to like our past metrics, and I started looking at them from our YouTube, I remember we talked about the bulletins and stuff like that. And even the biggest one now is our live stream views. And me and our worship director, Saran, he went through it all with me, and we were looking at it. And it was really interesting to see who's watching from where and who's... Yeah, it's just so, like who we're reaching.
All these metrics are important, but to me, the foundation of it all are these, what I'm calling the 0.0 metrics. But now here, there is this question that I just left unanswered. I said this in the episode. I said, look, this is the thing. These metrics, it's not about the numbers. It's the mission that the numbers are measuring. That's what's important, the mission. And now this leaves an important question that we just have to talk about, and it's this. What is it that the church is trying to accomplish? And, maybe I'll just put the question to you, Jake, because on the one hand, maybe it's like so obvious to everyone who's listening what the church is trying to accomplish that this is a question you don't even ask. But I don't think it's as obvious as people think it is. If you're to, people who are listening in, of course, we have a lot who are part of our church, but there's also people who are listening and they're parts of other churches. Or even if you're part of our church now, you used to be part of another church, you just ask yourself this question: what is it that churches are trying to accomplish? Any thoughts just pop off right away in your mind?
Man, I think the first thing that comes to my mind is like the Great Commission, because it's
got
the word mission in its name, but it's like the root of what we're called to do.
That's right. So Jesus said, go and make disciples. Listen, that is at least the heart of it. Baptizing, teaching people to fully obey everything Jesus has commanded. That's at the heart, of course, the Great Commission. And now, I would think that every church in one form or another says, okay, that's right. We're all about the Great Commission. But what does that mean? How would you know that, your particular church is really fulfilling the Great Commission? What would that mean in everyday practical terms? What does that look like? These are the questions that, are obvious, and people are, you just have to think to yourself like, all right, here's another way of putting it. I have a lot of colleagues who are pastors, and, probably they're in a church, and their church is, runs programs. They're busy getting sermons ready every single week. There's worship committee meetings. There's fellowship committee meetings. They're putting on events. There's children's ministry. There's youth ministry. And I mean, they're very busy running these programs, but every once in a while, they may just sit back and like, I keep this ship running. I keep the balls moving. But just because everything's moving, what am I accomplishing? Or what's supposed to be happening here? And I think, if you're a pastor, if you're a church leader, even if you're a church member, at some point or another, you're going to sit back and you're going to say, wow, what are we trying to accomplish? And we were talking about this just before we started taping the episode. And Jake, you just told me something profound. Maybe you can say it again.
Yeah. I've heard it said this way, is that it's easier to know what the church is against than to know what it's for. And I know when I heard that a few years ago, I don't know where, but it like really changed how I do what I do and like why I do it. It like made it so that we have to be as clear, we as church leaders have to be as clear as possible of what we believe, if not overly clear to the point where it almost sounds like we're repeating it.
Yeah.
I mean, hourly, like it's got to be.
I mean, that really is something. There. I mean, there is more than a grain or a strain of truth to what you've said. I mean, a lot of people in the world really don't know what the church is trying to accomplish. They just know what the church is against. And so, I'm glad you brought that up with me because I think it's so true. And here we're just dancing around this. I have a proposal, and this is actually the proposal that we follow as part of the Disciple Standard podcast with our Multiply method. There is something very, on the one hand, it's simple, but it's very particular that we're aiming at. And anyway, I'd like to share that. Just these are the 3 simple ideas. We're helping people to know Jesus. We're helping people to make Jesus known. We're helping people to live a Jesus life. Know Jesus, make Jesus known, live a Jesus life. And, you're right, which is, as leaders, we have to really communicate this. If, as an example, you were to come to our church, which is Sunlight Community Church in Port St. Lucie, Florida, there is no chance that a Sunday would go by where we don't specifically say, this is what we're about. We're helping people know Jesus, make Jesus known, live a Jesus life. And I think this really is at the crux of the Great Commission. First of all, we're just helping people know Jesus. I almost see this as a series of stages that you go through. It's the first power that comes into your life when you get to know Jesus. And you encounter Jesus by getting to know God through Scripture and prayer and through Christian fellowship, relationships. We're so big on relationships. This is how people get to know Jesus. There's like a power that comes into your life and it begins to transform you. And to the extent that you begin to understand what the gospel means and who God is and what he's done for you, it moves from your head down into your heart and finally out into your life. But it's power. It's transformative. It can change everything. People who are stuck with finances, or people who are stuck with relationships, or people who are stuck at work, or whatever the issues are, this can change everything, just getting to know Jesus. And that's really the first thing. We want to help the power of Jesus Christ and his gospel be unleashed in every person's life. And I believe that, when Jesus said, go and make disciples, that's really the first impulse, like go help people know Jesus. I think that's, it's at the center. And we have a very clear means and method by which we help people know Jesus, helping them get into the scripture, helping them learn how to pray. We put them into intentional relationships, and we walk through the gospel with people in such a way that they will really get to know Jesus. But that's only the first step. I mean, of course, we're going to help people know Jesus, and every church should be about that. And whether, every program, every ministry, it should all be focused on the gospel of Jesus Christ and helping people know Jesus. But then, now here's the second part. And I actually think this is where there's just so many churches in my prior history that I've known about, and I think just as we're talking about this, that's where it stops. The majority of people, they gather around one person who teaches them to know Jesus, and they're just supposed to come week by week, whether it's at worship services or in various different programs, and somehow they're going to draw closer to Jesus. But I really think that's only the first step. We also are helping people make Jesus known. And every person is unique. They have an incredible power and potential built inside of themselves. And every Christian, this is our way of putting it, disciples make disciples. Every Christian that's called to be a disciple of Jesus is then sent to be a disciple maker. Disciples make disciples. And boy, if you just go to the average Christian person who's been coming maybe to church for years and said, okay, I want you to go make disciples, the truth of the matter is most churches have no process to help the average ordinary person know how to go and be a disciple maker. And as a result, in a lot of congregations and a lot of churches, very few people are, because we have no process. But that's what we're about here at the Disciple Standard podcast, and with our Multiply method. We actually have a training program that is going to help you step by step to train a person to know how to be a disciple maker. And we believe that every single disciple should be making disciples. If you've been a Christian for a long, long time and you're listening to this, you say, wow, I've been a Christian for 10 years and I don't think I've made a single disciple yet. We can change that. Get in contact with us. We'd love to put you through our training, because you have no idea the kind of power that could flow into your life once God starts using you in this way, when you move from just being a receiver to being a giver of the gospel. At any rate, what we train people to do is know the gospel well, to really know it, backward and forward, so that if at any moment they have an opportunity, they can share the gospel with others. And then we're very clear about this. We want every person who's in our disciple-making movement to commit to making at least 2 disciples every year. So we want everyone to be in an intentional discipling relationship with at least 2 people each year. And, in that way, you will be doubling yourself, and then those people will be, quadrupling you, and then, it just multiplies and grows. And then finally, not only do we help people know Jesus, and not only do we help people make Jesus known, and every disciple should be doing that, but then we really want to equip and empower people to live a Jesus life. And I actually think there's like a third level of power that comes into a Christian's life. I call it the power of multiplication, when they really surrender themselves toward this mission of disciple making, and there's no telling what God can do with people. And so we encourage people to serve in the worship and mission of their local and global church, to use all their gifts, talents, and abilities to serve in that way, and then to really courageously keep in step with the Holy Spirit, so that each of us are uniquely made. God has a multiplying mission for every single one of us that, it's there and needs to be brought out. And I think this is what the church is supposed to be about, that we're supposed to help people live a Jesus life and know this multiplying power. At any rate, I really believe that it's got to be that simple and that clear. And now, here's the thing, Jake. If people are listening in, they now have to evaluate, like, okay, on the one hand, like, of course, churches are supposed to help people know Jesus, and churches are supposed to help make Jesus known, and churches are supposed to help people live a Jesus life. But is your church doing that? Can you definitely and easily say that, man, you have a process and a procedure that is just abundantly clear in your church that helps people know each of these 3 powers? And I suppose then, if not, our encouragement is, hey, connect with us. We'd love to partner with you. We believe that, you could do it. Become part of our Multiply method. Become part of our larger network and system. If this intrigues you, get in touch with us. Comment, share, let people know about this, and we'll get in touch with you if you get in touch with us. We'd love to have you be a part of it. In just a moment, we're going to move to our next segment, which is always called the tipping point, because we believe that, hey, we should just take the opportunity to highlight in real ways. I mean, week by week, you'll hear us do this. We can just tell you, okay, well, Here's the tangible proof that we're helping people know Jesus and make Jesus known and live a Jesus life. Here's the proof that people are getting to know Jesus more. Here's the proof that people are now making disciples. Here's the proof that people are multiplying. I guess my question is this, like, do you have this in your church? These are, that's the mission that we now want to number and count up. Wonder if you have any thoughts, Jake, before we move on.
Yeah, I love what we've created with this. I know you put in like countless hours into creating the multiply method, and all of like how it labels exactly what you just talked about. And, it goes along with like what we talked about, how we have to be super clear. And what's clearer than 3 simple steps that kind of, like you said, track with each other. Like once you get one, you naturally want to go to the next one,
right,
and further. And I love it. I think what we've implemented is like game changing.
I hope so. Listen, what are your thoughts? Do you have anything that you'd like to add, to supplement or to make better even the things that I've tried to at least propose? Do you have any questions? We'd love to hear about that. So make sure to get in touch with us. At any rate, just like I promised, we're going to move on to the next section, the tipping point, and let you know what's been happening this week. So let's do it. All right, everybody, great week this week. This week, we're welcoming 7 new disciples. This is a multiplication movement. If you're listening week by week, you're realizing there's new people that are being added every single week. And just love how this is happening. So this week, we get to welcome Kelly Manassian, who is a disciple of Becky Sweetman, Pradell Bonnet, who is a disciple of Josh Sakrowitz, Tammy Crispus, who's a disciple of Robin Winter, Eric Schluckeber, I don't know if that's right or not. We'll call him Eric S., who's a disciple of Andy Seitzma. I'm guessing, Eric, you live in Texas because I know Andy does. We have Carol Poolstra, who's a disciple of Elizabeth Bauma, Sotis Hernandez, who's a disciple of Michelle Miller, and Roger Sellen, who's a disciple of Bob Crow. Want to welcome each and every one of you. Excited about what God is going to do in your life as you seek to know Jesus more and you're being trained how to become a disciple maker. It's great. And thank you to each of those, Becky and Josh and Robin and Andy and Elizabeth and Michelle and Bob, for your commitment to make disciples. It's just fantastic. Thank you for what you're doing. We're celebrating 3 first-time disciple makers, which is a big deal. When people move from being a receiver to now they're intentionally a giver. And we want to celebrate it. Andy Seitzma, Robin Winter, and Elizabeth Bauma. Great job. We're so proud of what you're doing. And we just want to pray God's blessings upon you as you work with your disciples, that God's going to multiply your efforts each and every time you meet. And a special shout out to Harold Winter. Harold has reached the 10 milestone. What that means is that he has a combination of 10 disciples and or descendants. Disciples being the people that he's discipled, descendants being the people that his disciples have discipled and who they've discipled. There's a network of 10. And just want to say congratulations. Great job, Harold. We're proud of you. That brings the total number of disciple makers into our system at 622. This number, as I said, just keeps on growing. It keeps on multiplying. And we're excited to see what God's going to do in the upcoming weeks, months, and years as he continues to interact with more and more people's lives with this multiplication system. At any rate, that ends this segment, and we're going to move on. We've got a fantastic interview coming up with one of my good friends, Aaron Mamuyac. This is Ordinary People. All right, welcome to my friend, Aaron Mamuyac. Actually, Aaron and I have known each other for quite a long time now. Aaron is one of the first people that I began to disciple, and he's made a profound impact on my life. So, Aaron, glad to have you on the show. Welcome.
I'm glad to be here. I was actually the second person you've discipled.
That's right.
So, claim to fame.
Yeah, and I still have a very vivid memory because I really felt God calling me to somehow mentor and disciple you. I think I met you when you were 17 years old, And I recall that you had come over to our house, and actually, it's a different house than we live in now. We were around the pool. I don't remember what we were even doing. And we just got to talking. Well, anyway, I really had this impression like, okay, I know I should somehow or another pour my life into Aaron. And I remember one day, and I don't remember the particulars of what we were doing, but you were in, at that time, our church lobby. Our church now has expanded. So it was our old lobby, and you were sitting on the floor, and it actually took me some amount of building up the courage to, come and ask you about this. But I remember I first asked you, I said, listen, would you ever consider that God might be calling you into ministry? And I remember what you did. You looked up at me and said, no. So then I was like, oh, okay, no problem. But what if we started meeting together, maybe like an hour a week? We could study the Bible together and talk about theology. And you thought, yeah, I might like that. And so we did. Anyway, there's a long history. I mean, it was beyond theology. It's just a friendship got started. That's been a friendship for a long, long time. But maybe, can you give me some of your recollection? What has that meant to you over the years? And tell me about what happened.
So maybe from my perspective, I grew up in a Christian household with very Christian parents, Christian grandmother. And so I was raised in a Christian household, but I was a kid, right? I never really got it. But I kind of, just kind of went with the motions. And I kind of agreed with everything, kind of. It was just like there, right? It was like cultural. It was just part of life.
Yeah.
When I moved from San Diego, I'm from San Diego originally, for those who don't know. When I moved to Port St. Lucie, Florida, I experienced what everyone else experiences when they move to Port St. Lucie, Florida, and they were removed from their whole life. It's just like this strain of loneliness and depression and like just not knowing. I don't know. It's something about it, right? I hear this all the time from people, like when they move to Port St. Lucie. A lot of them are kind of frustrated, or they move back to Port or whatever. That was me, and so I didn't really know anyone. So when you asked that, it was like I was in a bad spot. I was like, what are you talking about? I never even thought. No one ever approached me with ministry or the possibility of ministry. But then you said the Bible study, and so that kind of met me where I was, right? Like I wasn't really doing anything. Didn't really know. Didn't really have like a firm, tangible grasp on what I believed, and it paired up a potential like friendship, relationship with like understanding something that I've never really understood, but always been around me, which is my faith. And so it kind of was like a perfect match for me at the time.
Yeah. Okay. And you were 17 at the time. And I think probably what happened, soon after you graduated from high school, you entered into college. You started studying business and business marketing in college, which is something that's always appealed to you. And I guess, why I have this segment, it's about ordinary people. You are an ordinary person. You had your joys, you had your struggles, you had your talents, you had the things that you liked and didn't like. And anyway, you were studying all that. But over the course of time, I think, it's fair to say you're a pastor now. You're an ordained pastor. Somehow or another, in the midst of our getting together once a week and just our friendship, God started using that to start to shape and clarify your life.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I don't know what happened. It's kind of like it was a slow process, and I didn't know what was happening at the time. But after college, I had this track of like going down marketing. I was going to move to New York. I had been scouted. I've been, recruited or whatever. But then we were doing discipleship for what was probably 2 or 3 years at the time. Yeah. And so I felt like this pull, right? And I decided, obviously I decided to stay in Port St. Lucie and just kind of hang around. Like my mindset changed over the last 2 years to like, oh, I want to be in ministry now. But I was still wired in that marketing business type of way. And so it's this weird marriage. Like my desires went, changed from like pursuing what I thought my goals were, like have a business or whatever, be a big time marketer. And then I had that initial like nature or whatever, and it was just directed towards like ministry and church. And so what ended up happening was I mean, like I have no special like abilities for anything. I was just like a college kid who just graduated. Like even if I was scouted, I wasn't this like phenomenal marketer. You just had to learn. But I just had like these particular quirks or desires or things that I was just interested in. And I saw God take those and use them in different ways. And since then, I was like, I mean, I've been the youth director, pastor here for like 8, 9 years. And during that time, we saw our like Instagram blow up and marketing go up. And because I was able to take that nature of like whatever
Right.
marketing or that inquisitive nature I got, and I put it into marketing or put it into ministry. And then that's kind of what exploded. And I saw that a lot when I was when I was directing youth group. Like it's so interesting to see how God, it's like a celebration of what God is doing, how creative God is, because God creates all types of different people with like I don't know, temperaments and interests and talents, and then he shapes them. Like once he gets a hold of them, he shapes them, because this is how I felt with me. It shapes them and then releases them into ministry. I mean, oftentimes I think about like your background. You got this like mathematics background and stuff like it. So like you take that and you take the analytical nature of that and you release that as a pastor. And I know other people like there are different types of people,
Right.
who make different types of leaders, but it all forms like this, this creative picture of God who has taken anybody, who could take anybody, just do radical changes in their life through another person and then release them to do the same with other people, which I saw time and time again, year after year after year. So I'm just blessed to be a part of that long chain there.
Yeah, and let's put our finger on it, because I think you're circling around something that's really important, which is not only was there an intentional discipling relationship that came with me and you, but then you started intentionally discipling people. And I mean, you've become one of the most, prolific disciplers as a result of, how our relationship together. There's something about how God uses friendships and relationships. Some people might think it's esoteric, like God's calling and the way he shapes our lives is just, it's esoteric and it's disembodied and he somehow speaks immediately to us. But I think actually the truth of the matter is he uses friendships and relationships in very key ways. And we've got to be intentional about that. I mean, if you could, what's your thinking about all that?
Yeah, I think it's for me, I need practical. I need tangible. Like I'm not like up in the clouds. Like let me. I mean, this sounds kind of bad being like a pastor at church, right? But I'm not like trying to figure stuff out in the clouds. I'm trying to converse with other people who I trust with, close to God and who walk in a similar lifestyle where I want to like kind of model and stuff like that. So that to me is where God, I feel like I glean wisdom from other people who have a credible background with, their faith and stuff like that. So I've just wanted to be able to do that for other people. For me, when I was in ministry, at least, this is probably maybe a unique thing, was that I needed trusted people around me to trust the youth group with. And the only way to do that was to disciple these guys. So I needed them with
Right.
me all the time. So if something would come up, like say something, I don't know, in life, they need to see how I go through it and how I could help them lead it. And then like we bounce off each other. It was just like this relationship that just happened to where the discipleship grows past like an hour a week, but it grows into like a more organic relationship and friendship, which is, I think, the more powerful thing. And I think that's modeled in Jesus too, with when he had his disciples with him all the time. And so I think that's just a natural cause where, the community comes together in that way.
Yeah, I think you're right. The other thing that I've reflected on over the years is just multiplication. So you were 17 when I first met you, and we've spent time together. And of course, I've poured some of my energy into you, and then you've poured your energy into other people. But we've had a front row seat to see that, in one way, it's just really simple. We're friends. But God's like taken that friendship and multiplied it like in ways that we could have never imagined. What are your reflections on that, this whole multiplication of it?
Yeah, that's it's really, it's really crazy, right? I did it. I was just so here's how I think about it, right? Whenever I preach, I'm really thankful for my grandmother. I call her
Yeah.
Lola, right? And I hear people all the time, and they're very kind. They say like, like the sermon was great, or really spoke to me. And every once in a while, I'll get like an older person who will say, "Hey, just that really spoke to me, and God's doing great things through you. And I wish I could like do something, or like I wish I was your age, or like I'll get that every once in a while." And then I love that because I'm like, you know what? An older lady, like my grandmother who was like 70 or whatever, poured into me in very practical ways. Like if she can do it, you can too. Like God's not done with you, and He could take anyone at any life stage, and kind of draw that out. And I think to myself, wow, my grandmother poured into me, and you poured into me, and now indirectly, like those energies, that effort was pushed out into other people. Now, granted, people don't have a stage, right? And I get that, but people have like really powerful connections with their friends and their family around them that you and I could never get to. Could never
Everybody does. Everybody
Every-
has a network of some relationships where they can make a huge impact.
Yeah, it's powerful. And recently, I just picked up. I got connected with a disciple name is Eric, and he's got like powerful relationships and friendships around him, and I just can't wait to see what God does through someone like him and countless of other people. I mean, if anything, you have your kids, or your spouse, and
Right.
that's like, so it's like the strongest relationships around you can be changed because, or can around someone can be changed, but just because you disciple or you partner up with someone a few times a week. So I think it's powerful.
Well, that's awesome. Aaron, I'm so pleased about what God's doing in your life, how He's using you, the friendship that we have, and just excited the same way you are as we look to the future. At any rate, want to thank you for coming on the program. Thanks for being here. We are glad to have you. And for everybody, thanks for joining us today. That ends this episode of the Disciple Standard Podcast, and we're looking forward to seeing you next week. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in to the Disciple Standard Podcast. We're so glad you joined us. We encourage you to continue the conversation by joining us on social media. Also, if you want to learn more about the Multiply Method or learn about how to take the Multiply Pledge, we encourage you to join us on our website at multiply222.com. Have a great day.